On the affirmative side, I'd like to give you the opportunity to respond to the negative arguments, and particularly like to hear what you have to say about Dr. Prinsky possibly having a conflict of interest and not having solid empirical evidence to back up the term digital native. So anyone who'd like to?
It depends what he comes up with. Dr. Prinsky actually did two papers. The first paper where he stated the case, that's one in the opposition told us. But in the second paper, he started to investigate how the brain changes when it is actually used for the same repetitive task for hours and hours each day. And he came up with a number of papers which actually explained that when you do something repetitive, day after day, hours after hours, the brain actually changes its shape. It changes its form. And what he really goes on to say is as the person or as the children's brain changes in size, we should adapt to use this extra energy, to use this extra area to actually help them learn and help them study. If they can actually use the ways that they actually play 12 hours a day, if they are playing 12 hours a day, 6 hours a day on their computers, if we can investigate a way to actually make that a learning experience, but still as exciting, then are we not going to benefit? And I think that was what he was trying to push for.
So I'd like to pass that to the negative team, and certainly be interested in hearing what you have to say about the brain development being demonstratively different than the brain development of someone not working with technology.
Okay. The term that he's stating to, that he's referring to is called neuroplasticity. And Dr. Prinsky, while he did cite it, he actually had no journals, he had no academic hardcore research to back up his claims. Now, one thing that if we're arguing on the premise that neuroplasticity is going to change, our brains are going to change and they're no longer concrete, okay? What they found in the same study that I was referring to earlier is that actually people who are of 65 years old spend on average 4 more hours a day than people who are in the quote digital native, in the digital native bracket, which means that the argument that only these digital natives are being affected by technology is completely inaccurate. Everybody's brain is changing. It's not just you to say that only digital natives or people born after 1980 are the ones whose brain is changing is a misnomer as well.
Can I just come back
Yes,
quickly? The problem here is that if you look at the norm, yes, everybody's brain is changing. But what we have here is we have a sizable part of the population where the brain is changing the same. It's not that it's the norm and bits here, I'm changing here a bit here, I'm doing a bit there. This is a group of people where the brain is changing ensemble, okay, all together. That's what we want to utilize.
If I may interject for one moment. While even if that is, the brain is changing, and even though it might be that the majority of the world has that shift, there are still a variety of socioeconomic and demographic differences that doesn't necessarily dictate that these brain changes mean that they all have the same learning profile and are capable of learning in the same manner.
Could I interject, please? I'd like to move away from this neuro-brain changing because I'm not a neurosurgeon, and quite frankly, I don't know much about my brain changing. What I do know is that the world is changing and we need to change with it. Educators need to change the way they view technology role in everyday life in order to understand students' educational needs. That was by Tapscott, and he wrote an article on digital natives need tech-rich education. So at the end of the day, being an IT educator, you have the ability to have so many applications that are taught in today's world. And if I ask my students, let's do a Prezi presentation, and they don't know how to do that, then your job is to teach them. Because in the world, the economy is where we need to learn how to use these applications in order to get good jobs, to make the money, the world go around, to produce money in economies. And if we are going back to typewriters, like I used to have to go to when I was a student, they have become null and void. As students, when I was a non-native, I had to learn how to cook in school. The girls had to do sewing, cooking and typing. The boys had to do metalwork and woodwork. That has changed. Those methods have changed. So we need to base everything on our history, and we need to focus on, if those methodologies have changed, here comes the technology and we need to change with it.
Can I build on what my colleagues say? I'd like to pick up a couple of points that were made by the opposition. One is about holistic learning. The secondly is about soft skills. On the contrary, I would put to you that holistic learning for the child is actually enhanced. In fact, holistic learning for the whole of the population is enhanced, and so are soft skills. Let me give you a realistic example. If I'm learning how to become a better presenter, I have now got the technology to be videotaped, as we are here. I can use this debate as a forum. How well did I do on this debate? I can look at it back on YouTube. I can then look at it, see how I can improve. I can teach, I can show it to my children in my classroom. Ask them what are the pros and cons, how could it have been improved? All of this is available through technology. So there, the whole child is learning through holistic approaches. We're not just learning about the traditional methods of learning, about maths, English, and so on. We're learning about how to become confident, how to become better presenters. All of these things are changes in the method of our learning. So these changes in the method of our learning are used together as a combination with the digital technological age. And if we don't encompass that, then we're missing a big opportunity to move forward. And this forms the preface of our argument going forward.
So is the change in method, or is technology just one more tool?
Well, I challenge completely your assertion that what you're saying is a change in teaching methodology. What you're prescribing is a change in curriculum. You're prescribing the use of technology in a different way. You're prescribing that we shouldn't teach home ec anymore. We shouldn't teach how to bake in the kitchen and rather teach how to use Prezi. And I support absolutely that situation. However, the question is, should teaching methodologies change? That is what we're debating here. And from my perspective, let me give you a short example. One thing that has become quite popular is to look at using a Kindle to read in the classroom. Why? Kindles allow you to, on site, right where you are, look up words, look up things, be able for students to increase their reading comprehension. However, the methodology that you use to teach that does not change whether you're using a Kindle or a book or a method within the methodology is the same. You are teaching students to read, to increase vocabulary, better their reading comprehension, and continue along that path. Whether I use technology to make it easier, whether I use technology to have the student be more aware, that doesn't necessarily change the methodology that I'm using. And then I extend that to state that at times, overuse of technology will decrease a student's abilities in certain things that are important. For example, there are students that we know, that we see, and there are studies that Joe has, I believe he can speak to you about them in a minute, in which students are unable to look up words alphabetically in a dictionary because now all they have to do is type it. Now, these are basic skills in which students need to know, because once you're out in the workforce, you know, we are not necessarily educating primary students to go out and work. We're not educating them to be workers in the workplace. We are educating them to be members of our community, which they need to problem solve and critically think.
Also, building on the example that you gave of having the debate and recording it and then coming back, this is self-reflection. This is a method that's been used for ages. Just because we have the video recorder now to record it hasn't changed it in any way. It's still self-reflection. We have peer reviews.
On the contrary,
You have
I would argue
people-
it has.
It's even better when it's a person, when it's a bunch of people. Like, I could take this tape and go home and review it and see what I have done. Or I could ask these people to tell me what they think of what I said and to guide me or to help me or to point out certain things for me. It actually makes it easier, it gives me more feedback than just me having a taped.
I'd like to interject on that.
Go on.
So would I.
So would we all. That doesn't swing very much. That
Coaches
doesn't.
who coach multi-million-dollar sports games teams around the world. They have video games so that the athletes can look back at themselves. It's not enough to just say, oh, you did really well, and you caught that ball with your left hand, you should have caught it with your right, etc., etc. If they can see how they played, and they can only do that via technology.
Sorry, but we never argued that that's not a good thing to do. What we argued is that in the past, prior to having the technology to do that, the coach would sit there and tell you, you're not catching it with the proper hand. So you're not grabbing it and pulling it in.
So you've changed your methodology, which is what we're talking about.
No, we've changed the technology. We haven't changed the methodology. The methodology is still
self-reflection.
Rinse, repeat, we're watching you, we're telling you what's wrong. Now you're watching yourself and telling yourself what's wrong, in addition to us telling you, because you're not going to know what's wrong.
Self-correction then.
But you won't know what's wrong without the support of an educator. That's the key.
Okay, I want to come in here because I want to change direction.